everybody, Kathy Hansen here. Thanks so much for joining me today on National Pencil Day. Did you all know it was that? I thought it was a perfect day to give you all an overview of all the amazing things that you can do with pencils. I know there's probably going to be some of you that have never drawn at all before. This class is for you because you probably go to that pencil aisle and have no idea what to get. For those of you that are beginning pencil artists, I got some great tricks for you. And for those of you that have been doing pencil art a lot, at the end, I am going to share with you some really cool special effect techniques that I've come up with. So I'm going to flip my camera and get this party started. And here we are. I am going to cover all kinds of things, but first I wanted to share with you just a few minutes about the products I'm going to be using today. You're only as good as the tools you work with. So in pencil art, it's basically a good quality paper, good quality eraser, sharpener, and artist grade pigment pencils, guys. You really do not want to use student grade pencils because there is just a little bit of graphite or charcoal in that pencil and a lot of filler. When you use an artist grade pencil, it is jam-packed full of pigment. And that's what allows you to do all the wonderful blending effects or special effect techniques or get really rich values. So I am using General Pencil products. I thought I'd show you real quick a few of the packaging that you can find them. The SketchMate 49SK is a really good one to get because you get a good layout pencil, which is an ebony pencil, some charcoal, some graphite, sanding paddle, which I'll show you how to work with, that high quality extra soft white vinyl Factis eraser, and a little red all art sharpener. Another great beginner kit is the 525 BP, which has an eraser, 3 degrees of pencils that we use a lot in pencil art, as well as that black layout ebony pencil. I'm also going to be using another eraser, a good old-fashioned kneaded eraser that General Pencil has, as well as my go-to mechanical eraser that allows me to erase lines as thin as my pencil lines. Okay, probably the first thing I want to get started with is there are 3 pencil tips that we use a lot in drawing. Right out of the box, you are going to get a point. As you use it a while, you're going to get a rounded point, which is the point that we use when we're blocking in a lot of color. And when you've used the heck out of it, you're going to get a blunt tip. A blunt tip is going to give you, let's go over here, a wide mark. That rounded tip is going to give you a little less in thickness. A sharp tip is going to give you a thin, precise line. So obviously we use that precise tip when we want to add details. And then when we want to block in, we're going to use the rounded tip because you will see how effortlessly it lays down pigment and fills in an area. You're going to use the blunt tip for darker color, whether it's a line or you want to block in, okay? So there are 3 pencil tips. Then there's 3 hand positionings too. I was showing it in the handwriting position where you have the most control, whether you're drawing in an object or just making line work. This is the most controlled. The lines are going to be the stiffest and most precise. If you do the overhand position, you are going to notice that you have less control, but the lines are going to tend to look darker because you're adding more pressure without even knowing it. The third position is underhand. We usually do that when we're on an easel or something, and it will give a very light, loose mark. So it's really good when we are just trying to softly, loosely draw in an object, or we're going to, our plane distinction, things like that. So it's much, much looser. Getting back to the handwriting position though, You notice when I drew that line, my fingers were way up near the tip. That's going to give you the most control. Now, if you back it up right here where it says USA, by the way, General pencils are the only pencils made in the USA. Forgot to share that with you. They are made in their factory in Jersey City, New Jersey, and they've been making these handcrafted pencils there since 1889. Okay, you're going to find I like to digress. So now I'm going to go up where it says USA, and you're going to notice that line's lighter and a little looser. If I go about halfway up where it says General Pencil, it's going to be even looser and lighter. If I back up even more looser. So you see, mark making, there are just so many different ways to make a mark right off the bat, even with 1 degree, just by where you position your hand on that pencil when you're working it. Now, since I showed you a little bit about looseness, but also degree alterations, I'm going to go into values with you. So many people say, why are there so many darn different pencils? Well, each pencil has its own voice. It makes its own mark and its own value. HB, I got this sheet I kind of did for you right off the bat to show you. HB is about the mid-range. This is usually the pencil I draw with or I add values with. So it's going to give you about that value and that width of the line. Now, if I hop up to a 2B, you're going to notice if it's a high quality pencil right off the bat, you're going to see it's slightly darker and the line's going to be slightly wider because there's a softer pigment core. I'll hop up to a 4B now, do the same thing. It's going to be slightly lighter right off the bat. And that line's going to be even a little wider because it's softer, so more pigment rolls off the tip. Then I'm going to get up to a 6B right here, and it's even going to be darker, and that line is going to be even wider. Then there's hard pencils. Your hard pencils, with soft pencils, the higher the number, the darker it is, and the wider the mark. With your hard pencils, it's just the opposite. Here is a 2H, and you're going to see that it is lighter than your HB, and that line, well, I'll put it closer on this side. This line is lighter and thinner than the HB. And as I work up, I could do a 3B and show you that line's even a little thinner. We could go up to a 4. We could go all the way up to a 6. General Pencil, by the way, has 20 different degrees. And one pencil that no other company makes, Graphite, is different than charcoal. Graphite has gray tones to it. Charcoal has black hues to it, with the exception of this 9XXB. People that do a lot of pencil art always say, oh, 8B, I wish I could get it darker and even get rid of that shine. Well, that's what this 9XXB pencil does that General makes. It literally allows you to get a flat matte black when you want really, really darks in any of your graphite designs. Okay, I think I want to talk just a few seconds about papers because I'm going to work on a few different papers. Paper makes a difference. We've already distinguished you need a high quality pencil. Now let's go to paper. You are going to find, as the more you play around with it, different papers, the pencils react differently on. Now this is 90-pound drawing paper, very, very flimsy, whereas this one is much thicker and has very little bend to it. This is 111 pound, and this is 70, not 50. What I look for when I draw pigments down is it gonna sit on top of the paper so I can get a nice erase? Is it gonna blend out nice? And I just try different types of pencils on it to see if I'm going to get textures or not. Some have textures. See how they all look slightly different? There's vellum. Now, vellum erases beautifully, but it tends to grab the pigment, so it's going to be a little more textured, which is awesome if you're doing something that has texture in it, whether it's trees, tree trunks, houses, but you really wouldn't want those textures lines showing if you were doing petals. Okay, marker paper, believe it or not, it doesn't erase all the way, but it did blend for me and not grab. There's illustration paper, Bristol, mixed media. You'll notice much more texture starting to show up, as well as machine-made watercolor paper, or sometimes even copy paper. So I highly suggest you play around with different papers. There are some papers, sadly, just want to grab all that pigment and do not allow you to manipulate it, blend it, and move it around on the paper. Don't advise using those papers. So it's all experimentation. Find what works best for you. If you find you're going to be doing a lot of layers, you're going to want a paper that can absorb a lot of pigment. If you're doing light, soft layers, you can go with one that it sits on top and limits the amount of pigment that you can put on the paper. So it's trial and error, just like it is with your paints, your paintbrushes, everything else. You find what works for you.
Hey, Kathy, we have a question in the chat here. What is the difference between Vellum and Bristol Vellum?
One is smoother, one maybe has a little more texture. It depends on the brand. Some of them are thicker, some of them are thinner. Some vellums you can see through, some are opaque, if that's helpful. I would suggest you go to a lot of the websites of people that have papers. If they're smart, they actually have education about all their different papers, what pigments work best on them. Pastel, charcoal, graphite. Is that helpful? Someone asked, what's my favorite drawing paper? I work a lot with Canson or chart pack papers are my favorites at this point in time. But you know what? That's hard to say what your favorite depends on the type of work you're doing. If I'm doing a serious charcoal, I might go with Stonehenge paper. You know, that's why I say a lot of companies do individual sheets as well as pads. Go out and buy different sheets of paper, experiment, play around with them to see what works best for you. Some people are heavy-handed, so they really have to work further back on the pencil because they just lay a lot of pigment off right off the bat. Some people got to get a little closer because they can never seem to get it dark enough, you know, because they have a very light touch to their work. Okay. Julia, you can spell those two types of papers out for them, right?
Yes, so you said Stonehenge and, oh, somebody else got it. Canson, Stonehenge, and what was the third?
Chart pack. What's nice about chart pack is their pads and their journals all have pages that you can take out and then pop right back in. So again, I like different ones for different reasons, if that's helpful. I want to talk to you a little bit about blending techniques. I want to show you two types of blending techniques. In a flower, I wanted my petals to be very, very soft. So once I drew the pigment in, I softened them out using a blending stump or tortilla. The leaves, I wanted to look denser, have a little more texture. So I actually blended out all the values just using the pencil tip approach. So I'm going to show you both of those right now, okay? I'm going to switch back to a 4B only because I think that'll show up real good for you. And notice where my hand is when I'm going to lay pigment down. It's way back here. It's not up here. So I am going to, and I tend to almost do circles and overlap them. If any of you do colored pencil, that's how you fill in an area. And it's better to go lighter instead of darker. You can always add more. So if you've got the pencil tip blend, once you end here, let's say you want it to soften out to about here. Then all you just do is start hitting the paper less and less. Don't make contact with it all the time. Even go a little further back. And you're just trying to kind of soften that edge out where it looks like it's a lighter value. Okay. if I was going to use the tortillon, now the difference between a blending stump and a tortillon, a blending stump is like compressed paper. So when you blend with it, it will tend sometimes to even make it a little lighter because it likes to grab a lot of this and absorb it. Not always, depending on the paper you're working with. If you use a tortillon, which is just paper that is wound, I don't know if you can even see up close, all those little coils. It's just paper. And you just, okay, you pick it up and hold it like this. You do not want to blend like this, because if you blend like this, you are not going to spread the pigment out. You're going to embed it right into the paper. That's the only time you use the tip. Now see the difference, what it looks like blended as opposed to just the pencil laid down. It's a little more textured. This is more velvety and smooth. So I pick it up and I just do those same circular motions. Now, if you find it's not blending, moving out for you, it means you did not lay enough pigment down. Again, don't immediately start to do a project. Start playing around, making marks, find what works and doesn't work. You're going to get the hang of it in time. So you lay it down, make circular motions. What you're doing is blending those individual lines together so it looks much smoother. And then when you get to the point that you want to start softening this edge, you're going to notice it's dirty and clean. So put the dirty part on the pigment area and actually make this part make contact with it, and do those same circular motions and just start moving away from that area. You see how it just softens out to nothing, okay? If you want this slowly to gradate, then I would have started pulling this pigment out sooner. This is a great way to indirectly even create several values. Now, to make something look dimensional, you need a minimum of 3 values. That's why we went through that sheet that showed you all the different values each degree of pencil will make. Most people will do an HB for their light and maybe a 2B for their medium and either a 4 or a 6B for their dark, depending how dark they want something to be. So I will grab my HB, 2B, and 6B and show you that same thing. What you basically just need to remember is all 3 values still need to be showing in an area. So make sure the first value you draw in the largest. Like that sound? And let's soften that out to absolutely nothing. Make that just soften out to nothing. Now, then I'll go with my 2B. If I wanted to go this far, then I really only take it out this far. So same area. Notice, not way down there, further up that pencil. Now, when you're doing several values, it is much easier to just soften the 2 just with the pencil tip. But if you were going to use your tortillon again, and continue to bring that out farther. And then your 6B is going to be your lightest, not lightest, smallest area that you put that pigment in. And go ahead and soften that out if you want. That's what creates dimension, having 3 values, a minimum of 3 values in everything you are doing. You do not, excuse me, want to go straight from an HB to a 6B as your second value. It jumps to, it's too harsh. You have to slowly go darker to create form. If you jump too quickly, you indirectly flatten that object. Hope this is making sense to y'all. See, that doesn't look near as dimensional as that, does it? Because you slowly get lighter or darker and use a minimum of 3 pencils to achieve that. Okay, so now I have showed you blending techniques, which I use in a lot of my work when I want it just nice and soft. But then there are also other traditional marks that you can make either within objects or in the supportive design that create either movement or texture or soft, full fuzziness or whatever. And some of these traditional marks are like this that I'm talking about. And you see how some of them that could be reeds, or these are movements. Some of them are very soft. Some of them look almost like fuzzy and furry. In these traditional marks, there's hatching and cross hatching that a lot of people like to use. This is just a hatch. Hatching goes, this is a way to create texture in an area, or a cross hatch. Now notice I held it differently when I wanted the tight, precise lines, and I was back looser when I just wanted them more loose and suggestive. There is squiggles will make a mark. Having lines go in different directions. That's a movement mark. You can do loose circles that intersect. The more you intersect them, it's going to start getting fuller and fuller and fuller and fuller. Teddy bear fur, something like that. Can you see how the circles create volume? M's are movement markings. W's are movement markings. You see how these could be wave marks. There's pointillism. You can do very tight, precise lines. But you can also hit that pencil tip from all directions, and they're going to be a little more irregular and erratic. See how those look totally different? Loose squiggle marks, chaotic ones. What I mean by that is like you've had too much coffee and you're doing those marks. Tighter ones almost look like graining within wood or something. Soft movement marks in something. Soft form. Staccato. See how they all look slightly different? These are some of the traditional marks that we incorporate in all of our work. Here's that example again real quick.
Hey, Kathy, a few questions from the chat. So first
Sure.
off, which one of these mark makings would you use for fur?
Well, fur could be one of two things. Fur could be a rounded tip, and you are doing, is this showing up?
Yes.
Sometimes fur can be this way, but sometimes fur can be directional. You'll have some thick lines, some thin lines going different directions. Now, that rounded tip is not what I want at the moment. Watch, I would switch out to a sharp tip and probably.
Well, actually, Kathy, we have been getting a question about what would you use for sharpening and how would you do that?
All right, we'll go sharpening next. Can you see how
Okay.
switching to a harder pencil is showing some fur lines going different directions? Also, your eraser. Now, this BM2 has a wide core. I pressed in, we'll put that baby right back in there. If I want this thinner, I lay it on one side and put my finger over it and just erase. And then I flip it over and I erase. And you see how I can make this fine little tip then? And another way with fur is subtracting. First laying, you get your 3 values in, and then you start extracting some of them out too. Fixative is a great, great question, and I'm going to hit that at the end, okay? Because I have found another cool way to do a fixative. All right, hopefully that answered your fur, because sadly I do not have fur example here right now. What I wanted to cover with all the mark making is another tip to make your work interesting is, can you see how the mark I chose here was lighter and looser, so it easily established that this tree was much further in the distance. It's not as crisp, it's not as detailed. But even these that were closer, can you see how I use different degrees and different marks? Some lines are thick and some are thin. You want every element in your design to have its own look and look slightly different, and that adds more interest and depth. Same with the trees. Every one of these trees has different textures in it. It just really, that's the simplest trick to make your work more interesting, is everywhere the eye looks, let it find something different, okay? Is everyone finding this helpful? I would love to get a little bit of feedback to see if this is what you were hoping for.
Everyone is saying yes, and that these are great tips. Somebody is asking, are you going to show us how to draw something? And I believe this is more about special effects techniques, but you go ahead and answer that, Kathy.
You know what? I'm going to hop right over to that. I can pop in and out. Okay. For someone who has never drawn at all, we are going to make this super, super easy. Everything you draw starts out one or more of the 4 basic shapes, which are circle, square, triangle, rectangle, okay? So let's say we are going to do a tree. What do you think a tree is? Starts out a rectangle. Even the branches, thinner rectangles. I mean, I'm making this super, super easy, okay? Let's do a triangle. Well, a triangle right off the bat could be, you guys, the roof in the front of a house. Okay, you start out loose. It doesn't even matter that it's all balanced. You start out loose and then you start, refining the basic shape. Another triangle could be, do you realize leaves? Leaves are really triangles. They're fat at the bottom and thinner at the top. A pear is a small circle with an intersecting larger circle. Refine that shape. You've got a pear. Really, the stem is a triangle that you then refine and create the shape that it is. A flower really starts out a circle. Here's a real easy thing, light lines. If you want your petals totally even, we got a pizza pie here. Okay. You just connect. When everything you look at, look to see what the basic shape started out. Is this helpful? Yes, no, maybe so?
Yes, and somebody up there had asked about the difference between the pastel pencils, the graphite pencils, and the charcoal pencils. Like, what are the fundamental differences between them? And I tried to answer to the best of my ability in chat, but I thought you could probably sum it up well in chat.
Grab a few real fast. All right, graphite is gray and steel. Now, I also wanted to share with you, I shared with you traditional graphite. I wanted to talk about a layout pencil. Some people love working with an ebony pencil because you can get it extremely light to extremely dark. General's layout number 555 is an ebony pencil. And what we mean by that is I can make light lines, but I can also, with more pressure, really get a lot of depth and darkness to it. So a layout pencil basically is what we use lots of times when we are just doing a basic sketch, because look, I did that light, maybe I want a little darker in here. I mean, look at all the different values that I can create using this layout pencil right off the bat. So you can use this all by itself or incorporate it within the rest of your graphites. Like, let's say I wanted it slightly darker because it has a little bit of a different tonal value to it. You can lay this right over your graphites, Pastels are, pastels come in sticks, they come in soft chunks, and they come in pencil form. And they are a pastel pigment, which is a color pigment that is a very, very delicate, fine particle pigment. So pastel pencils lay out color. And you can see, now this paper is grabbing this. You ideally would use pastel paper or a textured paper with it that's going to grab a lot of this. This is sinking right into this particular paper. You would never use this for pastel. But all those little particles you're seeing are what allow you to move that pigment around and blend it out. It would even blend more on the proper paper. That's how you know you have a good pastel, when it has all that dusting is what I call it, that I can manipulate it and move it around and blend it further. And these are General's multi-pastel pastel pencils. Another thing I look for, let me grab a different color, is, are there pure pigments in your pastels? A pure pigment, see, this is darker, this will even show it more. Look at all that gorgeous dusting and this beautiful pure color I'm working with. But I also look to see, am I gonna get a new color that's also fresh and pure and not all muddy? That's what I mean by hidden complements, because sometimes colors are a combination of several pigments to create that color. And if you get a red and a green or a blue and an orange indirectly within that color combination, it's gonna mud it up. You want to make sure it's gonna create new, fresh colors. Look how fresh and bright that green is. So that is another thing that I look for when I'm working with my pastels. Sometimes, here we go, we're gonna do special effects first. That sanding paddle I showed you earlier, sometimes if I want a thin amount in a large area, I grate that pigment right off of that pencil, and then I can manipulate it either with my finger. I can take a makeup sponge. The denser the blending tool, the darker the value is going to be, because it pushes it into the paper more. If it's softer and absorbent, it will blend, but it's going to pick up part of that pigment right on the sponge. So see how that's a lighter value? The best thing you can do is experiment and play with everything. And you're going to go, oh, I didn't know it could do this. I didn't know it could do this. So see, Q-tip even is going to be a little darker because it's a little firmer than that makeup sponge was. So I pick up all kinds of tools when I am going to be blending my pigments, whether it's my pastels or my charcoals. You can manipulate them differently than graphite, because graphite, the particles are more compressed, is the word I guess I would look for. Now, charcoal, General's charcoal comes in 6 degrees, HB, 2B, 4B, 6B. Remember, the higher the number, the wider the line's going to be, and the darker the value is going to be. So charcoal is a lot like pastels. Do you see it really lays down more pigment than graphite? is blendable this way, but it's also blendable with your stumps and everything, guys. It's going to now see this is really pushing it into the paper much more than my finger did. My finger shows more texture. The blending stump made it much more velvety and soft. So it depends the look you want. Make sure you're picking the right blending tool. I also like to mention that General has, besides their traditional charcoal, they have their Primo charcoal, which is a Euro blend charcoal. The particles are ground finer. So here was your line with your regular charcoal. Now look at the line with the Primo. It's even bolder. I'm gonna try to pull this up more. None of the white of the paper shows through like it did with the traditional charcoal, the orange pencil. And again, do you see more of those little pigment particles that you not only can blend with your finger? I like to use a camel hair brush. This is a IPC 2 by Dynasty, small flat blender. Now I can, look how I can move this pigment, all that extra pigment around, sometimes even with the brush, carry it out even further, or soften my edge out this way as opposed to using the blending stump. This is great for eyes, things that you just want very, very soft shadows with. Here's an example in Graphite doing that. The foreground trees the very distinct trees were drawn with the pencils. All these tree branches that I wanted way in the background, very loose. I just loaded this brush up with some of my graphite and I brushed them in. So there's all different ways, it's like, what are the intended effects? What do I want to communicate to everybody? And what's my best option? I'm showing you all these different mark making techniques, which is going to be the best one. And while we've got this up, again, here was that BM2. I could effortlessly create that snow just by erasing the pigment out. The same thing with the breast and this section of the chickadee. First, we put the graphite in, and then I slowly, this is kind of like that fur question. Can you see how I had that light value? And I just started pulling out at all different angles to make this look more like it was fur or feathers. And it's also great for these tiny little marks by subtracting, by erasing out instead of making marks, lines in. I'll pull this one up again real quick to make that point too. You'll see some of these lines I drew in with the pencil, but some of the lines I created by erasing pigment out. So it's all in relationship to what effect am I trying to share with everybody. I kind of jumped to erasers real fast too. The importance of a good eraser. You can see I lifted out the clouds, but I also lifted out lines here, as well as in the grass coming from different areas. The rope shows lines created by erasing as well as by drawing them in with the pencil tip. So this I drew in, but back here I erased as opposed. So it's mixing it up to get a different look. Hopefully this is kind of helpful. So getting back to your sharpeners, two things make a good sharpener: the type of the blade and the angle of the blade. And what I mean by that is a good sharpener has a very, very sharp blade, a stainless steel German blade. That's what allows longevity. So it can just sharpen and sharpen and sharpen. This will last, oh God, this lasts me at least a year. However, if you do colored pencils, you are going to want a different sharpener for your colored pencils than your charcoal and graphite and pastel, because colored pencils dull even the best sharpener because of the wax in them. And that wax starts building up on the blade. So you really don't want to turn around and then put a graphite or a charcoal in, because when you pull it out, you're going to have some wax residue. The second thing that's important about it is the angle of the blade. General's Little Red All Art Sharpener is angled. This is the point you get every time you sharpen it, especially with pastels and charcoal. You want an even amount of pigment, but not necessarily a real long tip, because they're fragile cores and lots of times they'll break. There's some artists that love to have like this much exposed, well, that's their technique. They're very light in how they approach working with it, but the majority of us just want even amount of pigment exposed all the way around. And they come in canisters. They come several different ways. If you don't like dealing with shavings, here's that same little red in a canister. My favorite one is their 3-in-1, because notice 3 different size holes, and I can keep my color separate from the rest of my pigments if I so choose. So they come in all shapes and sizes. You should be able to just put it in and be able to go 1, 2, about 3, and it's going to sharpen perfectly. That's when you know you have a good sharpener. As for erasers, I'm going to be showing you a lot of different pieces of artwork with examples of what I'm talking about. You're going to see I use erasers a lot. Kneaded erasers are really meant to just alter the value. If you got, and they come out of the package, I always work mine when I first get it out of the package, because this will never happen with generals, but I have had some brands that there's oil in it that you're really not aware of. And when you press it down to your paper, it leaves an oily mark. So with all mine, I just roll it around in my hand a little bit. Now, how much pressure will determine how much value is lifted off. So here's going to be a real light pressure. Now I'm going to do it a little heavier, a little more pressure. Can you see each time I am removing more pigment? Now, something to know that's good to know about this is if you want a bright white, you're erasing in the front of a flower, the very center of your work, you're going to want that a bright. But if you're also erasing in a flower that's way in the back of the bouquet, you're not going to want it as bright. You're going to want it lighter, because doesn't this look like it's more in the foreground and that's more in the background? So another
These are really
thing.
awesome, Kathy.
What?
These are really awesome, Kathy.
Awesome. All right, another thing you can do is make a funky shape with it and just go like this. Go like this. Couldn't you see if you had a field or grass or something, how this is your starting point to say, okay, I've got bushes in there. Then you would come back with pencil pigment and do even more. Do you see how you build off of it? You have your base and then you start building off of it. Leave it alone. Smush them in spots. Work off the side of that tortillon a little bit. Do you see how that's building it to something else? Okay. That ES20 extra soft white vinyl eraser. Look how this effortlessly erases. You got a good eraser when you don't have to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Because every time you're doing that, you are rubbing that paper, you're abrasing it. And it can only take so much before the top surface gets compromised, and then it starts lifting a little bit. And then when you put additional pigment down, it tends to grab in those areas, like, pilling with clothing. So you want an eraser that effortlessly is going to lift out. This ES20 is also cool, though. It acts like a kneaded eraser at times. Let's say you want it, I barely am pressing down. All right, I'm pressing down, but I'm not moving it back and forth. See how it lifts just a little bit? So sometimes if you don't have that kneading, go, oh, I wish this was just a little bit lighter. I set that in and this will pick it up. And this is self-cleaning. So you just erase that dirty off and you've got a clean eraser. Okay. So we talked a little bit about all of that. Now, for those of you who patiently waited for some special effect techniques, and I can do this in charcoal or graphite. First things first, grab that sanding paddle, and it doesn't bother me. I got a little blue in here. It's going to make it interesting. And I'll do charcoal because it might show up better. So I'm grading. I put this on top of the pencil and work the pencil back and forth. Why I do that is I'm in control of where the pigment is going. If you do this and then dump it, you're really not in control. So start thinking outside the box. What would a cotton ball do? I'm going to pretend I'm spinning off a bottle cap. So I'm going to make that spin. Look at that market mate. Can't you see that be an interesting background area? Now I'm going to take my ES20 eraser, which is denser than the cotton ball, and do the exact same spin. Look how much different that looks. Take a room key or a credit card. Can't you see that in a tree trunk for texture? Let me see if I can bring that up closer for you. I like incorporating these loose marks and then coming back with the pencil tip and doing ones that are tighter and more precise. The combination of all of them is what makes an area very interesting for the viewer. What else could I take? I could take my brush. Counts different. See how I'm moving my hand all around? And that's going to push some of the particles in where it's going to look darker. And when I lighten up, it's going to be looser. Look at that. Look how interesting. That's before you even put pencil tip to it to even further develop it. Okay. What else are some of the things that I like to do? I love incorporating, grading some of that pigment. Stencils sometimes, hints of a stencil in a background can make something interesting. And I'm going to do it one of two ways. Okay. For this, I'm going to use a soft, again, camel hair mop brush because they're so soft, they won't leave striated marks. If you use an acrylic brush, because the hairs are firmer, they're going to actually leave lines. Each hair leaves a line. So if you use a soft camel hair brush, that won't happen. Notice lighter and darker. How much pressure I applied as I was softening it. Okay. And here is an example of a stencil and a background of a design. Just to make it look totally different, I turned around and I did a stencil background. I'm always looking to try to make something look slightly different. Okay, another cool, there are so many cool specialty papers out there, guys. So many cool papers out there you can work with.
Hey, Kathy, what is the kind of brush again that you were using?
It is it's made by Dynasty. It's called an IPC2. And it's the small flat blender. They come in small, medium, and large. IPC2, the small flat blender. Okay. Now I'm going to get some more pigment out here real fast. I pre-ground some up, or they all come in powders too, guys. And I'm going to turn around this, and I'm going to use this brush. This was an old acrylic flat that should have been thrown out. Well, it makes the best pencil brush when I want to push pigment in further. Here is this paper doily. Oop, that's going to smear the design, gosh darn it, but you get the, look at that. And I did that in this design. This was the fun one, the background. I just brushed the pigment in and took my ES20 and my BM2 eraser and lifted it all out. Then I did the powder with the doily, and then the foreground flowers are all done with that tight pencil tip. See, they all look a little different, and it kind of gives dimension to it. You guys finding this helpful? Lost and found, simple, simple items in the house. Drywall tape makes a really cool design, guys. I actually have enough pigment still on that brush. I think that I don't even have to grate some. Just got to figure out where I put the brush. Here it is. Nah, I'm going to need a little bit more. Now, if I would have grated the pigment instead of working it off the brush, you would have little texture in here too. Notice I am making some light, some real dark. It's all in the amount of pressure that I am applying in here. Okay. Isn't that a cool mark? And again, remember, this will slightly lift pigment. So if you got it too dark, lightly press, some of it came up, or press hard, press hard. You can make designs within designs. These are fun, subtle, interesting backgrounds you can put around things. It just, you know, it grabs their eye. All of a sudden they're going to go like, is there a pattern in that pattern? Another thing you can do, this particular paper has a lot of fibers in it. I fell in love with this paper and I said, I wonder what it would do if I tried to burnish that design right onto my paper. So what I did was I graded the pigment. Since I'm running out of time, I'm just going to put it on this way. But lots of times I'll just grade it. What the heck, I'll grade it too a little bit because we might get a little texture in there as well. And then I picked it up and I laid it down and I grabbed a spoon. Okay. And then I started rubbing. I burnished it. I rub and rub and rub. And hopefully, if there's enough pigment, it's going to transfer to the paper and show that design, that texture. And it did. Can you see that? How I first did that was I was creating this piece of art and the background, when I was doing all the hit and miss branches, they were just too precise. I needed them to look much more diffuse. So can you see how I did it? I did it with that technique, with that little bit of fiber paper, and I laid it over and burnished. And that's how it gave me all those loose, lost and found. Well, I've got this one up here. This is where I used that kneaded eraser. Remember I showed it to you where I rocked it all around? It was so easy to create that area just by doing that. That was tight pencil tip. How these were pencil tip, very precise grasses. How I did all these loose grasses was I used a stick instead. And I took advantage. I like to break my tips and I let all four corners just hit. And that's how you can get really, there's no way that pencil tip will create them this erratic and this loose. This is what I mean by experiment with all of your product. I wonder what would happen if I did this versus this versus this. So, and again, you can tell this area I blended with the blending stump or tortillon, but because this is more textured, this was just pencil blended. And then working with that BM2 eraser again, I just love how effortlessly I can get these very controlled thin erase lines. Okay.
And real quick before, I was just gonna say, how do you fix your drawings has been
that's what I was going to show them next.
Okay, awesome. Great minds.
Now there is, first of all, yay, Julia, thank you so much for moderating and helping out with the chat. Also at the very, very beginning, and we'll have Julia possibly do it at the end, is my website, kathyhansen.com, but also my email, Instagram, Facebook, all that. If you guys have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me and I will gladly share additional information with you all. So most people use something called Krylon workable fixative that is an aerosol in a spray can to fix their work. Sometimes, especially with pastels, and if you're working in warm colors, fixative can tend to dull your work. It also tends to dull whites when you're working charcoal, black and white. So what I came up with, I thought, well, what did they do before they invented fixatives? And it was, they burnished their work. So a real easy way to burnish is good old fashioned cheap tissue paper. You're going to see one side shiny and one side is dull and absorbent. You want to lay the dull absorbent side down. Okay. Then you're going to take that spoon again and you're going to burnish it. What I am doing right now is pushing all those particles into the paper. And sometimes if you have a design, you might with pressure go over that actual design first. I usually don't have them smear on me, but when in doubt. So I'm going to burnish this little guy. And the paper is absorbing as much pigment as it can. What a smear is the excess sitting on top of the paper that has nowhere to go. Do you see how it is now not sitting on the top of the paper? The tissue paper absorbed it, and this doesn't smear now. So that's another fun way that I found, especially if you're traveling on the road outside sketching, great way to fix your work. Okay. Now, sometimes if there's enough pigment, and I don't know if this is, if I have a design in the foreground and maybe I want to repeat it way in the distance, I try to see if I can transfer that back. And it's going to be the exact same design, just a much lighter value of it, where it will transfer back even lighter for you. We are right at the hour. I'm going to switch me back over, and I sure hope you all enjoyed this. This is the tip of the iceberg. There are so many other cool things you can do. It all comes from experimentation and being willing to fail. Okay. Oh, you guys, thank you for all these wonderful comments. Thanks for sharing National Pencil Day with me and General Pencil, who made this all possible for you all. I really hope you support them, use their products. They've never let me down in 30 years. I was introduced to them in high school, used them through college, and have continued using them through my career and all my workshops. Made in the USA. They support artists, so I hope you try their products and try some of these cool things I shared with you. So until later, bye.